So this is a quick introductory video of how to install the solar-powered LoRaWAN gateway. This is part of the Weather Ledger project, and I believe this one will end up on the route of HS2, and there's also another building works near Gatwick Airport. I've commissioned the help of my son Adrian Carney to help with some of the bits and pieces. So Adrian, how old are you?
I'm 11.
Very good. And are you going to be making LoRaWAN Child's Play?
What does that mean?
Easy to do.
Yeah, I'm going to make it easy to do.
Child's Play. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the tools that we're going to use. So the first thing is we've got these various tools down here. So the things you're going to need are a universal socket set. You need a regular flat blade screwdriver. That's to both open the gateway and also tighten up a Jubilee clip. A set of combination ring spanners. A pair of snips to basically cut tie wraps, a small electrical screwdriver to wire up some chocolate strip, and a compass that's actually needed for the orientation of the sensor itself. That needs to point north. You could also use it to figure out where the sun is potentially. So that's the tool set. The next thing Adrian's going to point to is the solar panel and mounting kit.
This is the mounting kit and this is the solar panel.
So the solar panel generates electricity to charge up the battery. This is rated at 80 watts, and that gets mounted onto a pole with this aluminium mounting kit. You can see here this has got two parts. Well, it's got a pivoting arm, if you like, and also some a U-bolt and also a cable, a Jubilee clip. That's right, thanks Adrian, to hold it on. And we've also got some cable ties to keep all of the electrical stuff neat and tidy. The next thing we're going to talk about is the battery box. So do another, here's the battery box.
Here's the battery box.
Fantastic. So the battery box inside has a car battery, and also it has a power supply. You can see a switch on it, it's illuminated. If the light is on, then the power's on. If it's off, then if the light's off, then it's not on. It comes with a lid, of course, which normally would be on top of the box, and a strap to hold it all together, and also it's got some screws to screw the lid sort of firmly on. It comes with two cables. There's a black one and an orange one. The black one is the feed from the solar panel to the battery box, and the orange one is basically the feed from the battery box to the LoRaWAN base station. You should be aware that if you turn the power on, of course you are going to get 12 volts at a few amps coming out of the orange cable. It's fused, so if it were to short circuit it will blow the fuse, which you can see there's a fuse both between the battery and the power supply system, and also there's one inside there. So if you're finding there's no power, chances are the fuse is blown or the battery's flat. When you come to install it, make sure that the battery terminals are tightly on the battery. At the moment I think they're quite loose. For transportation I can take them off, so obviously you put them on and then tighten them up with a ring spanner. They're polarized so that, well, the blue is negative, the brown with the fuse is basically positive. You shouldn't be able to get the wrong one on because they're sized accordingly. So the next thing we're going to look at is the LoRaWAN base station. So that's right. So the LoRaWAN base station comes as a number of parts. There's the main unit. Adrian, could you open the main unit for me, please? Thank you. So that's the main unit. We're going to connect the power onto this part here. So the cable, the orange cable, comes through this waterproof gland, which then gets tightened up through the strain relief, and then the positive is the brown wire and the blue is the negative, which gets wired into there with a small screwdriver. Then there's an antenna cable which comes out, which screws onto the bottom of that, going to the antenna. That is all clamped onto the pole using this clamp here. And finally there's a bracket which is also part of the assembly, which is used to hold the antenna. The final part in the kit is the actual sensor itself. Adrian, would you be able to open that box? So we'll do a slightly separate video for this because the sensor isn't necessarily located at the same place as the base station, but the sensor would get mounted on top of a pole as Adrian's holding there. We'll cover that in a separate video, but that's basically that. So these are the bits that you should have. If you're missing any of these, then give us a call at Digital Catapult. I said my name's Peter Carney, and yeah, I'm sure your contact will be able to put you in touch with me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go across a field, take the stuff in, maybe carry it, it's not too far to go, and we're going to install it on a scaffolding pole. This is of course the thing which doesn't come with the kit. You will need something solid to mount it on, and in this particular field we happen to have a very handy scaffolding pole, which is just over there. Hopefully you can see it in shot. So we're going to take the stuff over there and then get busy installing it. So, Adrian, are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you excited?
Yeah.
And are you going to help?
Yeah.
Are you going to make LoRaWAN Child's Play?
Yes.
Brilliant. So we've now arrived at the installation site for our base station and solar panel. Adrian's very helpfully carrying the last tools from the car. So we're going to mount the bits and pieces on this aluminium pole, which is handily in the field. It was originally used also to measure wind speed. There was an anemometer at the top. Just before we install it, we're making sure that the site is nice and safe and it's clear, so there's nothing to, no trip hazards particularly. We're well away from any mains cables. There's some power lines going across the field just down there, but that's not going to cause us any problem at all. Also, just whilst we're in Hereford, we're in a place called Credden Hill, and the areas down there, it's the SAS base. You can just see they're obviously doing some building works as well. So the rest of the view, so it's absolutely perfect place. Now we've already done a bit of a site survey, and we found out that the sun basically comes over in the direction that I'm facing at the moment, so we'll obviously mount the solar panel. You want the solar panel to be able to catch as much light as possible, but we'll come on to that a bit later. So just panning back, hopefully, Adrian, you're ready for the installation. Is that the case?
Yep.
Are you excited?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Yep.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to mount the bracket on the side of the LoRaWAN base station. There's a nut on the back. It's a little bit fiddly, but you need basically a 13-inch ring span around that. And then on the front there's a bolt here. So again, I've got a 13 millimeter socket on an extension bar, so we can tighten that up. It doesn't need to be super tight. It's a nylock nut. It's not going to vibrate off, but just tighten that up. Pinch it up to, I don't know, maybe 20 foot-pounds or thereabouts, and then that's fine, and that's basically not going to fall off. The next thing you want to do is the U-bolt's going to go through here and around our pole. So the first thing to check, and Adrian, I'm going to scan up a bit, so if you're ready to follow me. So basically the U-bolt's going to go around the scaffolding pole. Probably something you want to do before you start is to make sure the U-bolt does fit around the scaffolding pole. Be a shame to get out there. So this is a standard scaffolding pole, probably 2-inch diameter. The U-bolt will go up to about 2.5 inches, so we should be fine. Okay. The LoRaWAN base station wants to be kind of high up, as high as you can get it. If you've got a ladder or a crane, ideally that's so. You shouldn't need to get to it. I mean, it doesn't, strictly speaking, need to be massively high, but you want it to be out of harm's way, and obviously the higher it is, especially if there's buildings around, it'll make the signal go further. So we're going to put that U-bolt through here. And then if I just come around here, dropped a nut. So that's the first one on. And I'm just going to get my socket. So we're just going to tighten that up, pinch that up. The reason that we need a ring spanner is that sometimes there's so much thread left on this that it gets in the way of the socket. So just going to keep tightening that up. Okay, so we're now going to put that at the height we want it, and just keep tightening up these U-bolts. This U-bolt until, again, doesn't want to be mentally tight. They're on with their nylock nuts, and the back of the gateway has got a serrated edge, so it'll cut quite nicely into the scaffolding pole, and it shouldn't slip down. So it's now pinched up so it's tight. I'm just going to make it a little bit higher than that, because we need to mount our solar panel underneath. Again, the whole arrangement wants to be high up, so it's out of the way, so it doesn't get hit by anything, but strictly speaking doesn't have to be. The solar panel, as long as it doesn't get clouted by anything. So we're going to go a little bit higher, so we'll stick that up about there. Okay, and that's nice and solid. Okay, the next thing we're going to put on is the antenna. That's got an antenna cable, so we may as well just put that on the bottom there first of all. You want to be a bit careful that this doesn't cross thread itself, so you want to just push it on and then tighten it gently to make sure the threads are going in properly, which it is. So just going to use my other hand for that. So again, wants to be nipped up. You'll know if you've cross threaded it. Okay, and then the next one, the antenna itself, small little unit. I think it's a 3 dB antenna thereabouts. So that gets mounted through this bracket on the side. Wants to be vertical ideally. So it's got a slot on it, you can see there. So it only goes in one way, it won't rotate. Okay, so we're going to carefully put that in. And there's a nut and a lock washer. So you want to tighten those up. Ideally, not if you're on a building site in the mud, don't drop it. There is a spare one in the kit, and you do need it. So we're basically going to tighten that up, and Adrian's going to keep focused on that while I go and get a little spanner. So it's a stainless steel nut. Again, like all this stuff, doesn't need to be totally tight. So this is why it's useful to have an adjustable spanner. Put that on, just pinch that up a bit, and then finally we're going to connect our antenna feed into that. Again, being careful not to crush the threads. Okay, so we're basically, we've decided the easiest thing to do is to put the bracket on the solar panel when it's on ground level. The bracket goes a long way, so the bracket is basically as long as the solar panel. It doesn't go the other way around. There are these little metal plates that catch under the edge of the solar panel. They want to be pushed out as far as they can go, and it's easiest if the nuts are pointing upwards. We then need another socket. This case it's a 10mm one, so just hold the bolt underneath and just gently tighten this up. And what I'm encountering at the moment is the fact that it is spinning, so we should probably put some lock nuts in the kit. But I'm just going to get another spanner. Adrian, keep shooting where it is. I'm basically just going to put a ring spanner underneath. Now the solar panel is of course glass, so we want to make sure that we don't drop anything on it, which is why we're taking a bit of care. As you can see, we've taken all the precautions of laying it on the grass, making sure there's nothing underneath it. So I'm just going to tighten that up again. Okay, that one's on, and this one. When we come to send the kit out, we'll basically make sure there's some washers in there. So there's our solar panel gone on there. So we're now going to loosen this U-bolt and lift it up into position and place it just beneath the gateway, and then we can angle it accordingly. So we'll stop the video there and move into the next phase. Okay, so I've taken off the Jubilee clip for the time being. Just going to use the U-bolt. We'll put the Jubilee clip on later. This is light enough for one person to handle, but obviously take care not to drop it and don't strain yourself. So we want to put the U-bolt through the top set of holes. And I've got the nuts and washers ready to go in the pocket. So we need, he says, nearly ready to go. This would definitely be tricky to do at the top of a ladder. So we want a plain washer first, and then we want that one down there, and then a lock washer, and then a nut. We'll be able to tighten these up later from underneath. Okay, so we're going to put the second nut on. So at the moment it's not slipping down, but it's not tight yet, so we just need to be a bit careful about that. So we've got the two nuts on. I'm just tightening up a little bit, just so that it's finger tight. In hindsight, this probably is easier done with two people, but I've only got one, so we're basically just nipping that up. Okay, now what we're going to do is got my socket ready. So this is what size is this? 17mm socket. And I'm just going to turn around here. And Adrian, if you could just zoom into these two nuts that we have here. Balance this on your head. Okay, I'm just going to tighten this up. Aha, this is the problem. This is when the socket is not deep enough. So we've now partly tightened the U-bolt so it can't slip down, but it's not really tight. Now the problem we've got, of course, is the socket is not deep enough. There's too much thread left because the scaffolding pole is not all that big. So essentially I can get it on, but I can't rotate it. So this is where again you need a ring spanner for that. So I'm going to use a 17-inch ring spanner. It's going to take a little while, but we can basically wind those nuts around. So Adrian, if you could just come around and show what I'm doing here. I'm just going to drop the solar panel down a bit, or maybe if I lift the camera up a bit. So you can just about see you've got the nuts there, and you can use a spanner there to tighten them up. So I'm just going to do that and lift it up in place a bit more. Okay, so Adrian, if you could film me while I'm doing that, that'd be grand. Okay, and we can lift it to its final position. Right, actually, it's here. A little bit higher. There we go. And just, there we go. So nip it up, just so it's nice and tight. Right, so the solar panel's in place. We haven't angled it yet, but we've got it pointing in the right direction. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put the Jubilee clip through around the pole and through that slot. It's just to offer a little bit of additional support as well. I don't think it needs it, but we're good and solid here. That's not going to go anywhere. We've got a really decent 10mm U-bolt through that, nice and tight, and we'll angle it in a minute. So we're now we've got the U-bolt in nice and tight. That's pretty solid. It's not going to come off anywhere. We've now put the Jubilee clip round the whole pole. This is where you need the regular screwdriver. So we're just going to tighten that up. To offer additional support. I don't think, strictly speaking, it needs it, but better to be safe than sorry. It's a backup, I guess. So that's nice and tight, and that is definitely not going to go anywhere. So it's pointing towards where the sun's going to come up in the morning, and it's been daylight. So now we're going to do a bit of the angling. So for that, you need to tighten up these two nuts here. One of them's the angle control, the other one's the pivot point. So you can see I can angle it however I'd like. For that you'll need a socket. We've got another one here. It's a 10mm socket again. So I'm just going to angle that up towards the sunlight and just nip those two up. It's a curious design this. I would have had a brace at the bottom, but the manufacturers assure me this is how it's done, so who am I to argue? But I would have had a kind of piece coming across here to the pole. But hopefully this will be alright. It has got it's got basically washers that cut into the metal, so it should be okay. Helicopter you can hear in the background is the SAS base down there, so I wonder if they're eagerly watching what we're trying to do here. So there we go. We've nipped those up nice and tight, and that should be pretty solid. I think that's not going to go anywhere. So what you can then do is you can tidy up that cable, maybe cable tie that on, and we'll do some cabling for the power, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we've got the base station up here. That ideally would want to be a couple of meters above the ground. We've got a solar panel here, again maybe 1.5 meters above the ground. Got the antenna on. Check all the connections, check everything's tight, it's not going to go anywhere. Do all of your cable tie work. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the battery box at the bottom and wire that in. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the power onto the gateway. Now the first thing to do is make sure that we're turned off. I'll bring the battery box in front. So in the battery box there's a switch. It's illuminated. Make sure you don't short circuit these two wires, but basically when it's in that position, so away from the cable, it's on, and also it lights up. It's got a light indicator light built in. That's off, so we should be safe to short circuit those together. It's all fused, so it should be fine. What we're going to do is we're going to wire this into the gateway. The brown wire is the positive connection, the blue one is the negative. You can choose to wire into the base station at ground level if you like before you put it up. In this case it's not too high, so I'm going to do it here. So you take a flat blade screwdriver to open the front of the base station, and you can then lift the door up and it should stay. The cable wants to go through the gland at the bottom, through the cable strain relief, and then into the connection there. So I'm just going to route the cable and then I'll show you when it's installed. Okay, so basically, so the lid you can fold up or fold down. I've got it folded up. You can also take it off altogether if you like. I won't do it now, but it comes off if it makes it easier. The positive is brown, I've gone in there, and blue is negative. Now, a slight correction is we are going to go through this cable relief, strain relief, but the cable's too thick for that. So I've tightened this up really, really well. And then I'm also going to put a tie wrap around there. So if you just keep recording whilst I grab a tie wrap. So what we'll do is we'll put a cable tie around here and pull it tight. That way just in case the cable was to get pulled, it's not going to pull out of the gateway. As I said, it's all fused, so it shouldn't be a problem. So I've put a cable tie around there tightly, and we'll just cut that off. And then even if this gets pulled, it can't go through, so that should be fine. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to power up the gateway just to show you some lights that should come on. So at the moment it's not powered. If you press the test button, there's nothing going to light up here. So I'm now going to power it up, and you will see when I press test button, various lights are on. When it's running normally, it's got a SIM card in it. You should have the power light on, which means we've got DC power, and you should also see GSM 1 and GSM 2. That means we've got a GSM network. If just GSM 1 is lit up, that means there's a network but the signal's a bit weak, so you can use that to debug. Now when you first power it up, it'll start coming online. It takes about 2 minutes to acquire the network, boot up. It's basically a Linux computer, so you can leave that open and just keep an eye on that. So what we'll do is we'll do a bit more cabling, and then we'll come back to that. So we've got power lights on, and it's a good sign, so it's booting up, and we'll come back and check that in a couple of minutes. So whilst that's powering up, we thought we could plug in our solar panel. So these are all polarized, so you can't get it wrong, but this one's marked minus, which goes to the blue, and that will fit in there. You click that in. He says, push hard, there we go. And then these lock in, and do this one too. And then of course take it out if you want to, you just push it together and pull apart. So that's basically the waterproof connections. You can't tell at the moment, well, unless you open it up, you can't tell if it's charging. I'll produce another video which shows, if you do want to look inside the box, there are some indicators that come on to show you whether it's charging or not. But at the moment you can't, but let's rest assured it's probably going to be okay. It's a good time to check your battery connections, so I'm just going to tighten these up. So if you keep videoing, Adrian, I'm just going to go and get a spanner for that. So these are just regular car battery terminals. Technically speaking, the terminals are made out of lead, so you might want to wash your hands after touching them from a health and safety perspective, or wear gloves and that sort of thing. Don't wear any jewellery. As you can see, I'm not wearing any watches, because if you were to short circuit yourself across the batteries, you'll flow several hundreds of amps, which would nicely vaporize a gold watch. So that's that. And that should all be good. So if you keep rolling, Adrian, let's just pan up onto the gateway up here, and let's just see what these lights are doing. So if we push the test button, there we go. I can see power on, power, GSM 1, GSM 2. So we should have a network, and in a moment I'll check that out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to close the cover, check all the bolts, and then tidy up all of the cabling and that sort of thing, and then we'll do one final video of the setup. Okay, so we've now finished our installation. So we're just going to go over the parts. So we've got the base station at the top. Adrian, if you come around to the back, we can have a look at the U-bolt fixing. So there's a U-bolt fixing just here. So that stops that slipping down, that's good and solid. You've got your antenna, that's nice and tight with the cable neatly done, that's the antenna. A bit further down, we've got our solar panel. So if you come around to this side, Adrian, so you can see this. So we've got brackets, which has got a U-bolt, the 70mm nuts on it, and also a Jubilee clip, so that's holding that on. We've tightened these up 10mm socket, so we're pointing the solar panel where we think the sun's going to be most of the time. You can always reposition it by just loosening it and sliding it around. We've got our solar panel clipped on, that's not going to go anywhere. Cables are neatly tied. Any excess cable, to avoid anyone tripping over it, are bundled up and tied onto the pole. We may put another type on in a minute. Inside the battery box, we're powered up. We've tightened both the battery terminals. The power's on, so that should be lit up, illuminated. You may need to cover it with some black cards so you can see. The lid's going to go on top. There's a strap inside, so you put the strap around the whole thing, and that stops the battery box from lid from coming off. It is the battery box itself is water resistant, and then this is waterproof. So any electronics, the voltage regulators in there, are all waterproof. And that's basically the setup. So all being well, that should be online. So I'm now going to take control of the camera, and Adrian's going to be, because he was the star of the video as well, and also helping to install this. So Adrian, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your name, age, where do you live, and where do you go to school?
I'm 11, I'm Adrian, I live in Hereford, which is quite near here, and I go to school at the Downs Malvern.
Very good. And today you've been helping with this installation of a LoRaWAN solar power base station. How long do you think that installation took in total?
Well, including the stuff we did over there with the explaining, 20 minutes, 30 minutes?
30 minutes, so you should have done the install in about 30 minutes. It definitely is easier with two people, I would say. I mean,
and also it would probably be faster if we didn't talk so much and explain everything.
That's true, but that's an important part. Explaining things for a key part of being a great engineer. So the point is that the installation, yeah, it would be easier with two people doing the actual installation, to hold things, that sort of thing, hold tools when you drop the spanner to go and find it again. And obviously if you're going to mount it up high, you'd want to be in a cherry picker or something like that. So that's basically the gateway installation. I'll check that it's online. We won't cover whether it's online in this particular video, but at the point that you come to install it, if you give Pease Carney a call, he can check within 2 or 3 minutes if it's come up online and make sure everything's okay. So thank you, Adrian. And say
Bye.
Bye, and thank you. Okay, so we're now going to talk about the installation of the actual sensor. This is a 13 parameter weather station. It does humidity, pressure, lightning, rainfall, wind direction, wind speed. There's basically two parts to it. There's the sensor itself, and that needs to be mounted on top of a scaffolding pole. So not at the side, but on top. And it's designed to accommodate up to a standard 2-inch scaffolding pole, ideally made out of aluminium. And this is the battery pack and transmitter. There's about 4 meters worth of cable between the two, so the recommendation is to mount this high up. So obviously if you mount it down low close to a building, it's not going to measure the weather very accurately. So it wants to be at least 4 times the distance as the height of the maximum building next to it, and as high up as possible. So maybe 3-4 meters is a good height for the actual sensor. Then other things to note is that it's got to be level, so your scaffolding pole wants to be pretty vertical and with a flat top, nicely cut off at the top, and that goes on top. There's some U-bolts. I'll just come a bit closer to Adrian here, my cameraman. So basically the pole goes through there, and then these get tightened up and that holds it in place. This device is the battery pack. Low down you can mount this, so you can change the batteries. They should last a year or so you should be okay. And you put a tie wrap through that plate, and then tie wrap that onto the scaffolding pole. So we've already got one installed here. This is a slightly different model. It's more similar, but it doesn't do the rainfall, that sort of thing. The important things to note is it's got marked on it an N. So N stands for north, and that wants to be pointed north. It actually wants to be true north, not magnetic north. So you kind of want to correct slightly to know exactly where true north is. I think in the UK there's only a variance of about 3 degrees, so the difference is your wind direction would be 3 degrees off if you get it wrong. But true north is what you're aiming for. So it wants to be flat, on top, bolted up nice and tightly. So we've got one here, so this one's in place. This one's not quite tight enough, but you nip these up. So this uses a 13mm. Again, you want to use a ring spanner for this because you will not get a socket that goes through over all the threads. So you want to just nip that up so it's nice and tight and won't come off. So just to be, when you're installing this, be a little bit careful of it, because there's a part of the sensor is this little wire here, so you don't want to bash that. It's not massively sensitive, but if you jam a screwdriver in, you'll break it, and then it doesn't work anymore. The top does come off, so this is in case it gets full of debris from the rainfall, but you shouldn't need to take that off. You should just install it and put that back in place. So that just has a symbol, and you can lock it back on. The spring in there is to stop any debris going down when it rains, any leaves and things. If things aren't working, and if it's in a very leafy area, you might want to have a look at that from time to time, and the water runs out here. You can put it on the pole before you put the pole vertical, but just make sure that if you're going to do that, that you mark where north is. So maybe make a mark with some sort of red pen on the side of the sensor, maybe put a mark there so you can see it from ground level, and maybe mark on the scaffolding pole which way is north so you can see. To get it super level, if you've got a cherry picker, there's also a bubble underneath, so when it's mounted above you, you can look at the bubble with a pair of binoculars or something and see if it's level or not. I think that's a bit theoretical really, but it's a nice idea. So that's the end of the video. This is now transmitting. We should be seeing data through on the dashboard. We'll do a screenshot of that for you later. But that is basically in 15-20 minutes how you install a LoRaWAN weather station. Thank you.